There are 4 stones on the ground in front of you. You know that instantly, without thinking, without counting. Now there are 17, and something in your head has just quietly given up. You can still see that it is a lot. You can see it is more than the pile beside it, but the exact number is gone. That gap between the amount you can see and the number you can say is what this episode is about. Because counting feels like breathing. It feels like something a human being simply does. It is not. Counting is a technology. It was invented more than once by people who did not have it, and it had to be handed to you by somebody else. This is the story of how a species that could not reliably count past 4 ended up building everything. Start with what you actually get for free in the box at birth. Flash 1 dot, 2 dots, 3 dots in front of a person for a fraction of a second, and they will tell you how many instantly, every time, with no errors at all. Psychologists call this subitizing, from the Latin for suddenly. It works up to about 4. At 5, it starts to wobble. By 6, it is gone, and you are counting. Babies have it before they can speak. In 1992, Wynn showed 5-month-olds a doll, raised a screen in front of it, visibly added a second doll behind the screen, and then lifted the screen away. If 2 dolls were there, the babies glanced and got bored. If only one was there, they stared. Something had gone wrong with a world they were already keeping count of. And it is not only us. Crows have it. Andreas Nieder's lab recorded from single neurons in a crow's brain and found cells that fired for 4 items and stayed quiet for 3 or 5. Number 2, neurons. In a bird. On the other side of 300 million years of evolution. Honeybees trained to fly to the 4th landmark down a tunnel, keep going to the 4th one after you move the landmarks around. So a sense of quantity is old. Older than primates. Older than mammals. But there is a second system underneath it, and that one does the heavy lifting. Look at a crowd, and you know roughly how many people are there. That estimate is never exact, and its error is not a fixed amount. It is proportional. 8 against 16 is easy. 15 against 16 is impossible. What your brain compares is not the difference. It is the ratio. This is the approximate number system, and it follows the same rule as your sense of brightness and loudness and weight. Everything in there is a ratio, which means the equipment you were born with is a dimmer switch. It is not a set of numbers. It can tell you more and less. It cannot tell you exactly 17. Exactly 17 is not a perception. It is a procedure. We know that because there are people alive today who were never handed the procedure. The Pirahã live along the Marshack River in the Brazilian Amazon. Their language has words for roughly 1, roughly 2, and many. In 2004, Peter Gordon published a set of matching tasks with them. He would lay out a row of objects and ask for a row that matched. Up to 2 or 3 fine. Above that, the matches drifted, and the drift grew worse as the sets grew larger. Gordon read this as evidence that without number words, exact number is simply unavailable. For years later, Michael Frank, Ted Gibson, Evelina Fedorenko, and Daniel Everett went back and pushed on it. What they found was more precise and far more interesting. When both rows were in front of them, and the task was to lay one thing beside another thing, the Pirahã did it perfectly, at any size. What broke was the version where the row was covered up first and had to be held in mind. So the failure is not in the thinking. The failure is in the storage. Number words are not what let you understand a quantity. They are what let you carry a quantity across a gap in time. That is worth saying slowly. A word for 7 is a container. You put 7 into it, you walk away, and tomorrow it is still 7. Further east, the Munduraku have counting words up to about 5. In the same year, Pierre Pica, Kathy Lemur, Veronique Izzard, and Stanislas Dehaene tested them. At estimating, they were superb. Asked which of 2 large sets was bigger, they performed like French adults. Asked to subtract exactly above 5, they cannot do it. Both inherited systems were completely intact. The tool that welds them to exact language was simply not there. None of this makes anybody less intelligent. And it is worth being blunt about that because this research has been badly misread for 20 years. The Pirahã navigate, hunt, and hold whole genealogies in a forest that would kill any of us inside a week. They are not missing a capacity. They are missing a tool they have never needed. In the same way, you are missing the 20 words a sea ice hunter has for the ice under his feet. But it does tell us something enormous about our own ancestors. Somewhere back there, everybody was in that position. Everybody. And then, somehow, people built the tool. The first counting device in history was not manufactured. It was already attached to us. Almost every counting system on Earth is built on 10 or 5 or 20, and there is no mathematical reason for that whatsoever. 10 is a poor base. 12 divides more ways and would have served us better. 10's only qualification is that it hangs off the ends of your arms. 20 means somebody took their shoes off. And when you find a system that is not built on fingers, you can usually work out what it was built on instead. The Yuki people of Northern California counted in eighths, not the fingers, the gaps between them. They counted the spaces where you slide the sticks. The Sumerians and Babylonians counted in 60s, and 60 is still sitting in your clock and in the 360 degrees of your compass. One likely reason: use your thumb to tap the 12 finger joints of one hand and hold how many 12s on the fingers of the other. 12 times 5 is 60. In Highland Papua New Guinea, the Oksapmin counted along the body itself, and Jeffrey Sachs spent decades documenting it. You start at the thumb of one hand and work up the arm, wrist, forearm, elbow, shoulder, across the neck to the ear, the eye, over the nose, and down the other side. 27 positions, 27 numbers. And the number is not a word. It is a place on a person. When Cash arrived in the valley, the Oksapmin had to make that body system perform arithmetic it was never designed for, and Sachs watched them rebuild it as it happened. Your own language is full of fossils from this stage. 11 and 12 do not sound like the other teens because they are not like the other teens. They are Old Germanic for 1 left over and 2 left over. Left over after the 10 you have already spent. The French still say 4 20s for 80, a stranded piece of a base 20 system that lost the argument. A score is 20. 407 years ago is a man counting in a unit older than the country he was standing in. The body works, but it has a hard limit, and the limit is not the number of joints. A count kept on a body cannot be left on the table overnight. You cannot hand it to somebody else. You cannot take it with you. When you fall asleep, it is gone. To get past that, the count has to leave the body and move into an object. And the moment it does that, it becomes something an archaeologist can dig up. In the 1970s, at Border Cave in the Lobombo Mountains on the border of South Africa and Eswatini, excavators lifted out a small piece of baboon leg bone. It is about the length of your thumb, and it carries 29 notches cut across it. It has been dated to somewhere around 43,000 years ago, which makes it one of the oldest deliberately marked objects we have. 29. It is very hard to look at that number and not think of the moon, which takes 29 and a half days to come back around. It is also very hard to prove it, and that difficulty is the entire problem with tally bones. Because a notched bone is ambiguous in a way that a spear point is not. Marks on a bone can be butchery. The bone can have been used as a cutting board. They can be decoration. They can be a grip. They can be an owner's mark. And even once you have decided they are a count, you still do not know what was being counted. The most famous attempt to break that deadlock was Alexander Marshack's. In 1972, he published a book arguing that the engraved bones of Ice Age Europe were lunar records, and that the changing shape and grouping of the marks tracked the phases of the moon. He was the first person to take the marks seriously as notation rather than doodling, and he did something nobody had bothered to do. He put them under a microscope. And then the microscope turned on him. Francesco D'Erico spent years doing the same work at higher magnification, cutting thousands of marks himself with different tools to learn what each one leaves behind. He established that the inside of a notch really does record the tool that cut it, the order the marks were made in, and whether they were all made in a single sitting. That is a real method, and it is standard now. But it demolished the lunar reading. Once you can recover the true order of the marks, the moon stops fitting them. Worse, D'Erico pointed out that a lunar model is close to unfalsifiable. Given freedom over where a month starts and which marks to group together, you can fit the moon to almost any set of notches, including sets you cut at random yourself. So the grand claim died. What survived it is better. Take the Ishango bone from the shore of Lake Edward in the Democratic Republic of Congo, roughly 20,000 years old, found by Jean de Haenzelin. It carries 3 columns of notches arranged in distinct groups. People have red prime numbers in it, and doubling, and a 6-month calendar. Every one of those readings is contested, and the honest position is that we do not know what it records. What is not contested is that the groups are groups. Somebody cut those marks in deliberate clusters on a tool they kept. And at Les Pradels in France, on a hyena bone around 70,000 years old, D'Erico and his colleagues found 9 notches that a Neanderthal cut with one tool in one sitting, evenly spaced, in a way that butchery never produces. Here is the test that actually matters, and it is beautifully simple. If every mark was made at once, you have a pattern. It might only be decoration. If the marks were made with different tools, at different angles, at different times, then somebody came back. Somebody came back to an object, found the place where they had stopped, and added one more. That is not decoration. That is a record kept by a person who expected a tomorrow they would want to compare against. Whatever they were counting, they had grasped the deepest fact about counting. The object remembers so that you do not have to. And then, for tens of thousands of years, that is roughly where it stays. Marks on bone, on stone, on antler, meaning things we cannot recover. Then farming arrives, and quantity becomes a problem too big to keep in anybody's head. A village has stores. Stores have owners. Owners have debts and a share of next year. Across the Near East from around 8,000 years before the Common Era, people start making small clay objects. Cones, spheres, discs, ovoids, little pyramids. Some plain, some scored with lines. There are tens of thousands of them at sites from Iran to Turkey, and for a century, nobody knew what they were. They were cataloged as gaming pieces or amulets or toys. Denise Schmidt-Besserat spent decades cataloging them and argued that what they actually are is an accounting system. One shape, one commodity, one unit. A cone for a small measure of grain, a sphere for a large one, an ovoid for a jar of oil. And crucially, one token, one thing. 3 sheep is not a symbol meaning 3. It is 3 sheep tokens sitting in your hand. Then comes the problem that changes everything, and it is a problem about trust. If I send you 30 animals and 30 tokens with a driver, how do you know the driver did not take 5 of each? The answer was to seal the tokens inside a hollow ball of clay, which cannot be opened without visibly destroying it, which immediately creates a new problem. Now nobody can see what is inside without breaking the very thing that guarantees it. So before sealing the ball, they pressed each token into its wet outer surface, leaving that token's shape on the outside. And there it is. On that clay ball, the same count now exists twice, once as objects and once as marks. It took a while, but eventually somebody noticed that the marks on the outside were doing all of the work. You could skip the tokens. You could skip the ball. You could simply press the marks into a flat tablet of clay. That is writing. Schmidt-Besserat's version of this is not universally accepted, and it is fair to say the sequence is tidier in the telling than it is in the ground. Not every token is an account, and the dates are messier than a straight line. But the destination is not in any doubt, because we can read the destination. The earliest tablets from Uruk, around 3,300 years before the Common Era, are not poems, not prayers, not laws, not the deeds of kings. They are receipts. Barley, sheep, beer, oil, cloth, land. How much from whom to whom? Writing was not invented in order to say something. It was invented in order to check something. And there is one more surprise waiting inside those tablets, which is that the scribes did not yet have numbers. Hans Niesen, Peter Damerow, and Robert England showed that archaic Uruk was running something like a dozen different counting systems at the same time. The signs used for counting grain were not the signs used for counting sheep, which are not the signs used for counting land or days. There was no such thing as 3. There was 3 of grain and 3 of animals, and they looked nothing like each other. It took centuries for the number to come loose from the thing it counted and become a thing in its own right. Which brings us back to the picture in your head right now. If I say the numbers 1 to 10, you probably see them going somewhere. A line running left to right, small at one end, large at the other. That line feels like a fact about numbers. Experiments show it is a fact about you. People who read left to right are measurably faster pressing a left-hand key for small numbers and a right-hand key for large ones. In people who read right to left, the effect weakens or flips. Your number line points whichever way you're writing points. And in 2012, Rafael Nunez, Kinsey Cooperrider, and Gerd Wassman asked the Yupno of Papua New Guinea, who live in a steep valley in the Finisterre Range, to point out where the numbers lie. They did not lay them along a line at all. Small numbers went downhill towards the mouth of the valley. Large numbers went uphill towards its head. Their numbers ran along the shape of the land they lived in, not along a line in the head, along a slope in the world. So even the mental picture, the thing that feels like the raw sensation of number, was handed to you by a culture along with the words. Every part of the equipment you use to think about quantity is inherited. The words, the base, the line. and 0, which arrived so late that people have been counting for 40,000 years before anybody bothered to write down nothing. Somebody taught you to count to 10. Somebody taught them. And that chain runs back without a single break to a person sitting in the dark with a piece of bone and a sharp stone. Who came back to it the next day, found the last notch, and cut one more. Every number you have ever used was passed hand to hand from there to here.